it is now 7:01, and I'm calling the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. I don't know if I have done this in the past, but I think I should go through the ground rules here. Any motion that we make on which we need to make a decision has to be done via a roll call vote. And I will call the roll, and each person will in their turn vote on the motion. So that's the main thing that we have to do in this video mode that we're operating in. Beyond that, it's just for everyone's interest, just to make sure everybody's clear, we are being recorded, so this can be picked up later by anyone else who wants to understand what went on in this meeting in great detail. There's always minutes, but the video recording is the absolute best place to come. Okay, top of our agenda tonight is, let's see, I gotta open my agenda, 1 second. Where did it go? I've already lost it. There it is.
Sorry, my wife is now calling, hold on.
Yep. Just to make a hash of things here. Top of our agenda is minutes. We have 2 minutes. We have the pre-meeting minutes, and we have the May 4th public hearing minutes. I'd like to see if we, because of the inefficiency of the roll call, what I'd like to do is take questions and comments and revisions on these minutes in a collected manner, and then we can have one motion to approve both sets as amended. So let's talk first about the May 4th minutes of the meeting that we held before the hearing started. Does anyone have any comments on that set of minutes? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to the next set, the public hearing on May 4th. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes?
I have a really big comment.
Yeah.
It's on page 6.
Yep.
2/3 of the way down, Article 26. There is a typo. It says manager instead of manager. Great.
Okay, since we're on page 6, I have 2 comments on page 6. On the first line of page 6, Mr. Banfield says something about, and it's FY, it says FY 21. I believe it's supposed to be 21. It says 22 at that point in the minutes.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I think that we are not, it just doesn't make sense if we're talking about, let me go to the page. I just am looking at my notes. So 1 sec, 4, 5, 6. Mr. Banfield noted that the FinCom will need to wrestle with developing a revised guideline for FY20. It's got to be 21. Right. It doesn't make any sense to have a revised guideline for wrestling with that for 22. We haven't even started 22 yet. So that's 21. And then if you go to the, where is that? On the second paragraph, about 6 or 7 lines down, I just don't know about the word hobbling in the middle of that sentence. Dr. Hunter noted that the school department is hobbling to keep things intact for K-5 students. Is there a better word? I'm not sure that's a...
Hobbling?
What's that?
Maybe hobbling? Hobbling together?
It could have been struggling.
Anyway, it just, when I read that, I just went, there's got to be a better word. Anybody got any suggestions?
Struggling.
Yeah. Yes.
Struggling.
Struggling. There you go. Struggling.
Yes.
All right. They're struggling. Okay. So with those revisions, are there any other thoughts? So we have 3 edits on page 6. Yeah.
On page 5 at the bottom of the page, this is more of a question. It's not an edit. I'm wondering about, at the bottom, they're talking about how they're going to use any excess funds. And then on the top of page 6, it says, Mr. Stanton indicated that a decision about moving any surplus funds to OPEB and/or whether to prepay out-of-district tuition will be made by the Regional School Committee prior to July 1. Do we know anything more about that?
I do. I mean, I watched, I don't know, Mary, you were there too.
I
You
was
watched,
there,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
yeah,
Christine, what did you hear? Go ahead.
I heard that they were going to prepay the computers. That was the big decision they made, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So there were some decisions they had to make to spend money before June 30th. So they met, I guess was it this week?
Last
Yeah.
week.
The last week. And
Yeah.
so that was one that they got a decision on. There may be others that they're going to do before June 30th, but that was one. And that's a big one, I think.
So they're going to prepay on computers?
Yes.
Okay. And they're having another meeting before the end of the month?
I assume they will. I don't
They
know. I
meet
don't know the answer.
They're
to
meeting
that.
weekly now on
Yeah.
Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, well, that's not really an edit, but it's a question. Okay, I
Chairman,
think I
I
need a
move that-
motion.
Mr. Chairman, I
needs-
move that we approve both sets of meetings as amended.
Second.
Okay, I have a second. Okay, so I'm gonna call the roll. Ms. Hartman,
Yes.
I'm Mr. Banfield, and I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Hickling,
Yes?
Ms. Ortner,
Yes.
Mr. Swain,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
Yes.
Ms. Zoll,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Packard.
Yes.
And we have a unanimous vote. Those are accepted. And we can move on to our next agenda item. Next up on the agenda is FY20 year-end budget adjustments. We have a memo that we received from the finance director, I believe, outlining some of those. There are 3 line items in I think it's in the packet somewhere. Hold on. Whoops. Carrie, is this in the packet? I'm just trying to remember where I saw it, or was it a separate email?
No, it's in the
It's in the packet. There it is. It's a memorandum that's part of the packet, and there are 3 line items.
So if it's okay, I'll just walk you through this.
Sure.
Okay, so this is something that we typically bring before you each year. In the past, we've actually struggled to get this to you by the deadline, which is July 15. So we're here early this year. You will recall that the town's budget is adopted by town meeting in 39 separate line items, so that the town is not able to make transfers between those line items unless town meeting takes affirmative action to do so, or through this year-end procedure that is outlined in Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B. And we have the last 60 days of the fiscal year, or the first 15 days of the next fiscal year, to present these transfers to you. So as the chair mentioned, there are 3 transfers before you this evening. We may have, as we actually close the year, if we may have another couple to bring to you, but this is what we're seeing so far. The first is legal services, and the transfer request is $291,000. The second is elections and registrars for $22,000, and the third is town meeting and town reports for $20,000. So legal services we've talked about multiple times, so I know that you're aware of the issue. And I refer you back to a memorandum I put together, which is also in your packet, back in January. So back in January, we came to you, we identified 3 options that we had to cure this issue that we had with legal services at the time. The first option was to ask for a reserve fund transfer, which we did. And after quite a bit of discussion, the committee voted to deny that request. The second option we had to cure this issue was to go to town meeting and seek a transfer under the existing budget appropriation. And as you know, we did have that scheduled. We submitted that warrant article, and had hoped that we would be able to take this to town meeting. Unfortunately, as you know, town meeting has been continued past June 30, and this is something that we need to get taken care of so that we can close the fiscal year. The third option then is what we're presenting this evening and it's that the year-end transfer under 44 section 33B. And so at the time I had also mentioned, because there was a question about what happens if no action is taken. So unfortunately, if no action is taken, then we would end up with a deficit, and it's not a legal deficit. And so it would impact our free cash. But it would in a roundabout way, because it would be reserved on our free cash certification. Then we would be required to raise that within the levy the next year. And so we wouldn't even clear, it would take essentially 2 years to clear that. I also did have a conversation with our auditors to confirm, how they would view this. And they said that they definitely would identify this in our management letter as a material weakness. And then we have a potential concern with our bond rating picking up on a management letter item. So I did want to review that with you again, because this is something that we really need to address at our meeting this evening. Just in terms of the other two transfer requests, they're very minor, and these really are in anticipation of additional expenses that we have. In the case of elections, we had additional expenses because of COVID-19 and the response. We had additional supplies that we had to order in terms of hand sanitizer, that type of thing that we wouldn't normally have. We also had some overtime related to processing the number of requests for mail-in ballots. I mean, it was pretty busy here the last couple of weeks. So we've anticipated that those costs are about $22,000 over the budget. And then for town meeting, we're estimating that when we have it, that we'll have some additional expenses, again, because of responding to the pandemic. So a total requested transfer of $333,000. We're very fortunate because we've had a number of our operations shut down essentially for about 3 months, that we do have some savings. And the easiest thing to do was to request that it be transferred from the library. At this point in time, the library has about $500,000 remaining in the budget after we account for the final payroll. So rather than present you with a series of a dozen transfers, it was easy enough to just identify the library as the one department to pull from.
Okay, so I think we need to talk about that a little bit. A few things, don't worry, we'll get to you guys. A few things I have off the top, Carrie, in generating the kind of surplus that the library has, is that a result of personnel savings, or are there other operational savings that's generated, $500,000? Were people furloughed, and as a result of them being furloughed, we end up with a savings that we can now tap for this purpose? Where's that savings coming from at the library?
Yeah, so we did not have any furloughs. There have been no furloughs of any full-time staff. There were a number of vacant positions at the library that were not filled. And we also had savings in utility costs and other operational costs.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I'm going to open it up to others who might have questions. Phil.
Yes, so I move and I oppose the transfer for the legal. And let me just explain the way lawyers view legal litigation budgets that go over budget. It is an extraordinary situation for litigation to exceed the budget by $291,000, even for a major huge case, which this is not. This is a multi-party case, but this is not the huge kind of litigation that large law firms often get into. So lawyers know when they go and exceed a budget that they are skating on thin ice. So I find it extraordinary for them to be presenting us a bill $291,000 over what we budgeted. They would have been aware what the budget was. As they exceeded it, they would have had discussions, or they should have had discussions with their client, which is the select board and the town manager, about exceeding the budget and how they could keep to the budget. And they would have known, since we're a municipality that allocates money at town meeting, that they may not get paid for all of these services beyond the budget, because town meeting would have to approve it. So I just find it extraordinary. And as I said the last time we discussed this, if it were something like a fire engine and the town manager said, I went out and bought an extra fire engine. I know it wasn't in the budget, but I bought it. Here's the bill. We might not approve that either. And I think in this case, this is not the way to allocate funds for litigation. The lawyers had control. They could have kept the case within the budget. They didn't, and we shouldn't do this. Now, town meeting in September can consider whether they want to fund this, and they can hear why it went over budget, why the money was well spent, and so on. But I don't think we should be held ransom because this could affect our bond rating. If necessary, I would ask the law firm to withdraw the invoice until town meeting. And frankly, clients do that to me all the time. Not all the time, but they've done that to me. And they do that to our law firm, which is a much bigger law firm than Anderson Krieger. So if it's going to affect our bond rating, it truly is, let's ask the select board to ask the firm to withdraw the invoice until town meeting has a chance to consider it. That's it.
Carl.
Yeah, the same thing is true of architecture firms and fees as well. You have a budget. So related to that, I'm going to ask, I mean, did Anderson Krieger ever come to the select board or the town manager and say, hey, we're, getting up to the edge here, and do you want us to keep going or anything like that?
I'm sure that there have been detailed conversations. The select board met in executive session, I think 3 times since the last time we met. And those executive sessions were about this litigation. So I'm sure that these conversations.
Were they about the budget? In other words, did
we can't know, Carl, if they all
tell them to go ahead
behind the curtain of executive session.
But Dean, they knew several months ago they were going to be 225,000 over, right? We went into the warrant with 225,000, which is in December. So now it's 280. So whatever discussions happened didn't happen in the last 3 weeks. They would have happened in 2019, I think, Phil, if there were any.
Well, what would happen if they came to us and said, we're not 291,000, we're $3 million over the budget? It wouldn't happen, but it's possible. You could staff up a case and end up spending that much money. Would we be entertaining a $3 million excess request? I don't think so. And I think we shouldn't be entertaining this. This is not the way.
When you go over budget without the okay of the client, you're out there on your own. You're out on a limb.
D.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, have we received an invoice for the $291,000, or has it just been through discussion?
We have received invoices for approximately $240,000, and the amount, the difference is an estimate for the remaining bills. So the bills, we typically are receiving the bills 3 to 4 weeks after the close of the month. So that does include an estimate.
So to Phil's point, there does exist a possibility that the select board could go back and ask them to hold the invoices the ones we've already received and any pending ones until our next fiscal year. Our town manager has said he did increase the legal fee budget to 300 and something thousand instead of the 225 I think those were the numbers, that because he thought that would cover the costs. So I'll leave that there, but I do have a different question, Carrie,
Could I just respond
Oh, sure.
to that first?
Yeah.
You know, I suppose the town manager or the select board could go back to town council and ask them to withdraw the bills. The fact of the matter is the services were incurred in fiscal 20. So they are with fiscal 20, and this is, if they're incurred and they're not paid in fiscal 20 or by September 15, it's going to be a deficit against fiscal 20.
Carrie,
That goes to my other question.
Yes.
That goes to my other question, which is, could you please explain what a legal deficit is?
So when I said legal deficit there, I meant in the legal appropriation. There are legal deficits under Mass General Law, such as with the snow and ice, and we can run that in deficit. And that is considered a legal deficit.
Okay, because it doesn't impact what the baseline is for the subsequent year, budget year?
Well, no, it does. It just means that there's a provision in Mass General Law that allows you to overspend your snow and ice budget to account for the cost of winter operations, but you have to raise any deficit the following year within the levy.
Okay, all right, thank
I
you.
mean, in general construction contracts, if the contractor goes over his budget, unless they bring a prior request for a change order for additional money and get the approval, the client, usually in case city or town, is not liable for that money. Now, sometimes at the end, you say, everybody did a good job, we'll give you the money, but I don't understand. I agree with Phil. Why are we paying this?
and
Parashar, I'm going to get Parashar.
the lawyers will
Bill,
will withdraw these
Parashar ask.
budgets when
You know.
the invoices when they're asked.
Sure, you're muted.
You're on
mute.
mute. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So thank you, Dean. Carrie, can you remind me, because I'm a little slow. If we don't approve today, absent sort of Phil's suggestion, if we want to avoid the legal deficit and issues on the bond rating, I thought Steve at the last meeting had gone over some options that would occur, right? So can you just go over what would happen if we actually don't approve this today? What would have to happen for the bill to get paid?
This is the last option that we have. We had three options: the reserve fund transfer, a budget adjustment at town meeting, and this year-end close process.
Okay, so if we don't actually do anything today or by July 1st, right?
By July 15.
July 15, what are the consequences, leaving aside the request for a withdrawal of the invoice?
So the consequences are that this will hit our fund balance, our free cash. It will be deducted from our free cash certification. And the Department of Revenue will then require us to raise this same amount within the levy in fiscal 21. And then at the close of fiscal 21, the money that we raised will wipe out the deficit. And so the free cash will be made whole at the end of fiscal 21.
Okay, so thank you very much for the explanation. So, I guess I understand everybody's frustration around the overage, and dealing with consultants in my professional career, I kind of get it. They should come to you, request a change, ask for more money, or realign the scope of the work if you want to stay in budget. I get all that. it appears to me that we're not totally privy to whether or not, and maybe Michael Lawson's in the meeting, maybe he can just answer a simple question without violating any executive privilege, whether those conversations occurred and that expectation that they would go over budget actually occurred. Because it would seem to me that if, in fact, the select board are in fact managing the case, they would have given that approval. And if they've given that approval, it seems to me that we're sort of going back and forth when in fact the decision-making authority was out of our hands about whether or not to exceed the scope and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, if it's a select board that are responsible for it, the citizens should hold them accountable, right, at the ballot box. But this seems to be almost a perfunctory process issue that one way or the other needs to get handled either by us or through this delayed process. And I'm not sure it benefits the town for us to go through a delayed process if at the end of the day, the town's got to pay up anyway. So
Okay, Mike Lawson is here, as is Mina Macarius from Anderson Krieger. So I'd like them to weigh in. As long as we're not violating any executive session rules, we'd love to hear some feedback. Michael?
Thank you. This is Mike Lawson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, let me first say I share your concern and somewhat frustration over this. Managing the cost of this litigation has been a very, very challenging activity. We tried every way we have known to us to try to keep the costs under control, but have been frustrated in that attempt at almost every turn. Council has come to us repeatedly to talk about new issues that have been raised in the litigation and the town's need to respond to those things. That's why I think the finance director and town manager came to you at an earlier meeting. I know that you did not view that as an emergency, but I don't want to debate that, but certainly many of these expenditures were simply not planned and not anticipated by the town. We continue to work very hard to try to resolve this matter. As you may know, we've been in consultation with the defendants and our counsel and their counsel to try to deal with both reopening the southern portion of the Estabrook Road and figuring out if there's a way to expedite settlement of this case. We continue to work very hard on that matter, but I must tell you that while you're frustrated with this, so too am I. It's just been very challenging despite our very best efforts to manage the cost. But I assure you that council has come to us and talked to us about the options, and our only interest has been protecting what we believe is the town's right for its residents to have access over the Estabrook Road. And we will continue to deal with that. But this has been, as you might imagine, those of you that are lawyers, very, very challenging. And Mina, I don't know if you want to weigh in, but I'd certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Banfield, if you'd like me to add, I can. I don't have much to add to what Mr. Lawson said. I share, and I will say just up front, I share the frustration with this. Our firm has been working with the town since decades, as you know, and we either as us or with our prior firm, or my colleague's prior firm, Paul Mondale. And we have rarely, if ever, exceeded the budget until the past couple of years with this case. It has been, as Mr. Lawson said, an incredibly challenging case. I will just to point out some things about the last couple of months. We were aware of this committee's vote and understood the situation in January and February. We have done what we can to limit any work. This is a court case, so there are deadlines. We limited any work we could since then in the court case. At the time, I believe in February or early March at the latest, Understanding that town meeting was in late April, while we were sending invoices so that Carrie and her team have them month to month, we explicitly said we would not ask to get paid until town meeting, when it was planned for late April. So this was not an attempt to come back and wait for a transfer at the end of the year. We fully expected to have the discussion with town meeting. Between the COVID crisis and now, I don't want to get into the details or the merits of what has and hasn't happened on the case, but I would just say that if you need the backup and you see where, and I think Mr. Lawson would support me in this, there has been very little action in court. There's been very little discovery. Almost all of the time that has been spent over a road closure, which was not authorized by the court, not contemplated by the court, and has been spent with figuring out what the town's legal options with regard to a road closure, the closure of the road undertaken by the defendants. We chose not to, at the time, immediately file a preliminary injunction, partially out of respect for the courts and the emergency business they had, and the town and the emergency business before it, and frankly, the legal budget and the fact that we weren't sure when town meeting was. That's where we were on the Estabrook case. There are, not the entirety of the legal budget is Estabrook. The other parts of the legal budget are our normal advice. We have tried to do things as efficiently and as limited a basis as possible, including trying to put off things into the next fiscal year if they could wait. Obviously, the COVID emergency and the moving of town meeting required some assistance from our office as well, and we've tried to be diligent about that. So I understand the frustration. I certainly understand where you're coming from. I agree with Mr. Swain on the score that clients ought to know where their money is going. I guess I appreciate Mr. Lawson saying so. We have been keeping the town in the loop every step of the way with the select board.
So Dean, can I just say something?
Just want to say thank you to Mina and to Mike Lawson for giving us a little more insight into what's up. So okay, go ahead.
So as a lawyer, it's the lawyer's responsibility to manage the budget. It should not be a source of frustration for the client, like Mike or the select board, to manage the budget. It's the lawyer's responsibility, and the lawyer knows that the legal budget for the town for the last year was $250,000. And so the it's the lawyer's responsibility to figure out how they're going to keep the funds within, or the lawyer takes a risk that if I'm going to exceed the budget by more than twice, I may not get paid because the town meeting may not approve it. And just like they agreed to be deferred on the payment until town meeting in April, they could agree to be that payment be deferred or not made if town meeting doesn't approve in September. And the firm would do this because it's their responsibility. And that firm has been representing the town for decades. They have a relationship with us. If they want to incur $291,000 extra, they're going to take a little bit of a risk that they may not get paid if town meeting doesn't approve it. So my motion is we don't approve. We ask the law firm to withdraw the invoices until town meeting, whenever it takes place. And I guess that's it.
Is that a formal motion, Phil?
Yes, that's my motion.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Carl seconds.
Under discussion,
Yep. D.
Carrie, would you please explain again about the invoices and if they are deferred, but the work was done in this year, what is the impact?
The impact is it will be considered a deficit that needs to be raised.
Okay.
Mary.
So Carrie, can you expand on that? So does that limit our use of certified free cash beyond that 291,000? What does it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What does it do to our ability to use free cash? That's where I get. confused.
So the amount of the deficit will be reserved from our free cash balance.
So it's like it's encumbered. Is that what you're saying, Carrie?
Yes, yes. And we will have to raise it. So residents will be taxed a second time. And then at the end of fiscal year 21, that reservation or that encumbrance will be released.
Why can't Anderson and Krieger withdraw the invoices?
Doesn't make any difference.
Devise the invoice to zero or something.
So
Happens.
but another piece of the free cash puzzle is that FY20 has generated a certain amount of, some amount of savings. You know, we usually are able to put in about $1 million, but this year it might only be 500,000. So, but that wouldn't be certified in until later in the year, like after the September town meeting is, I think, the way that would work. So there are puts and takes, but it nonetheless, our ability to utilize the rest of our free cash balance does not sound like it's impacted. Just this piece is encumbered.
Thank you.
Right, and I would also like to point out that in my preliminary conversation with the auditors, they will identify this as a material weakness.
Understood. All right, John's next.
Sorry, Carrie, just on that very point, did you speak to Moody's on that topic? And are we quite certain on what the implications may be for the credit rating based on that?
I did not speak to Moody's. I only spoke with our auditor.
Is there a precedent? Has this happened in the past in some other city or town?
Having a deficit that.
So a situation of this nature having implications for the credit rating, I guess, is where I'm going.
I would say, yes, there are instances of material weaknesses identified in audits impacting a credit rating.
Anyone else? Mary?
I want to clarify, material weakness then means that we in fact incurred bills that we hadn't budgeted for. Does that say what the material weakness is?
The material weakness would be that we had a deficit that was not allowed under Mass General Law.
I think it goes more to the point that our management of the town's finances is not behaving in a sound manner because we're unwilling to pay a valid invoice against work that was done. And that would be considered a weakness of the town's financial management of its affairs.
That's what it is.
And, okay, so maybe we're exposing that because that's what's happened. Christine.
Here's the situation. I'm saying it's not a valid
Bill,
invoice.
let Christine ask her question.
So it's a comment, not a question. So I agree with Pradeshar's analysis. The people who are authorized and have pursued the lawsuit are the ones who are managing the legal expenses and the lawyers. They have looked at it. They know more about it than we do. It's their purview. And if they have agreed that the amount should be paid, despite the fact that it is over budget, which does happen, I believe that's what we needed to hear. And I think the rest of it is okay. We should allow the transfer to happen. I don't think it's the Finance Committee's purview to say that we know more than the Select Board does about whether that bill should be paid. I don't think that's correct.
So,
John?
Yeah, Christine, I think I'd agree with that. I've been concerned that the Finance Committee is being drawn a little bit into, an area that is way beyond the scope of our committee. And if these expenses have been properly, approved by Select Board in conjunction with Town Manager and Town Council, it's beyond our scope as a committee, I think, to, question that, I think.
Mary?
Yeah, quickly. I understand, I think we're all frustrated that we're spending so much money on this, but we denied the reserve fund transfer because we had it wasn't extraordinary or unforeseen. So we had that as the reason why we denied that. We don't have that here. This is a bill that was incurred by the select board. They weren't blindsided by the law firm. The select board on behalf of the town entered into this, and I'm tending to think that yes, the people that we've elected to run the town have agreed to move ahead with this, and it's not up to the finance committee to make that decision.
So I have a different question. This is on the warrant, and does that become a moot article? Or could the article be moved and then the town were to take a vote that it did not approve of this expenditure, even though we signed the checks and it's all out the door? Is that something that could happen? I'm just saying, once it's on the warrant, anyone can move an article like that.
Dean, can I?
Yeah, Mary.
I think that article is now moot, and it's pointless now because, the point was obviously to get the money from the reserve fund transfer, but the bill would have already been paid. So it will become a referendum. And I don't think we want that. I don't think we ever, I don't think we denied the reserve fund transfer because we wanted to get into a referendum on Estabrook. We denied it because we thought it was bad budgeting and bad financial management. And we did get kind of pulled into the whole Estabrook thing, but I don't think that was our intention. Our intention was, please don't budget like this and come to us year after year after year to cover something that you've under budgeted. That was our reason, and now that's a moot point. So that's my feeling. I think we should.
Since Mina seems to still be on the call, I'd just like to know from his perspective. Let's presume that we move to get this paid this evening. We give the authorization from the finance committee. The select board has to sign off on these transfers as well, and that all happens. Is the warrant article, even though it's kind of hanging out there as considered moot, could that be moved to create a chaotic conversation or referendum, as Mary put it, from the perspective of the town meeting regarding these expenditures? Could that happen, or are we? Can we somehow just say it's moot and the moderator just says it can't be moved because it's not meaningful?
Good question.
Mr. Banfield, that's a good question. Some of that I can't fully answer because it'll be in the moderator's discretion of what is and isn't within the scope of the article. But assuming you provide the transfer now, I believe, and Carrie will correct me if I'm wrong, that the point of the separate article was to move from the reserve fund. Right. So there'd be no need for it, as Ms. Hartman said. And if the discussion is then wading into the merits of the litigation or something else, someone moving into, the only motion that's appropriate in there is to move something from the reserve fund into another account. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. And then if the debate becomes about money that's already been moved, it's really up to the moderator to decide whether it's within the scope of the discussion or not. Especially since some of what might be said may regard opinions of us or me. I guess I'd rather not tie the moderator's hands in that way. If she will have to decide that. I'm sure she may ask my input, but I doubt that it would be in scope, but that's her decision.
Okay, and I don't want to dwell on that point. We do have a motion. We have Phil's motion that we are deliberating on, and I don't know if we have any more comment on this motion or whether we're ready for a vote. Dee.
Just very quickly, in listening to what everyone has said, I agree with the comment about being blindsided. And I would suggest that there be better communication between the select board and the finance chair with regards to issues similar to this, that we not be apprised of this or uninformed in terms of discussions that have or had not occurred, so that we don't spin our wheels on issues that are out of our control.
So Dean, I'll just say one last thing, and that is, as a lawyer at a large law firm, I don't think an invoice that exceeds a budget by more than twice would be considered something that's due and owed. It's something that you're taking a risk. So when we discuss this as a legitimate invoice, the services were incurred, the law firm could easily withdraw and wait until town meeting and let town meeting decide. But it's not the same as somebody providing, like I said, a fire engine or a hard good. You're providing a service under risk, so
Yep.
you can withdraw that.
Okay,
You
So-
will.
to
Could
recap
I
the
just-
motion.
Could I
sorry.
just mention one thing? So one thing that's important to point out is the town meeting appropriations for fiscal 20 expire on June 30th. There's no legal authority for town meeting in September to do anything to affect fiscal 20 because the appropriations have expired. So if the invoices were held until September, we would be looking at needing to fund that with a new appropriation or with free cash.
Okay, so to recap the motion that we have in front of us, it would be to communicate, I believe, to the select board that they request that the law firm pull back the invoices for presentation at or around town meeting, and that town meeting be allowed to weigh in. Is that the motion, Phil? You're muted.
Phil.
Just to be clear, I'm asking that the invoice be withdrawn, i.e. written off for now until town meeting has a chance to consider it. Not held, but withdrawn. So they would have to send us a note saying, we're withdrawing those invoices until town meeting has a chance to consider. That's my proposal. And my proposal is that we deny the.
So just to put a clearer point on it, at the time that town meeting is considering this transfer, there would be no outstanding invoice. It would only be presented if town meeting were to approve the transfer.
Well, can I just ask a
Town meeting
procedural
did not
question?
approve the transfer, the invoice would just evaporate, and that would
Well,
be that.
can I just ask a question? If they withdraw the invoice, then what is there to discuss at town meeting? Because there's no invoice to pay
That's
off.
kind of where I was going with that question.
So, like, what's
No
the point?
invoice pending. There's no invoice pending, but
No.
there would be an invoice if town meeting approved of some funding. Then all of a sudden, an invoice would magically appear. But if town meeting did not approve of the transfer of funds, then there would be no invoice.
Can I just say one last word before we vote? We are going through so many contortions to have a discussion and second guess and send messages to the select board that we've spent many months and hours trying to do this. I think we've gotten the message across. So let's just act on our perfunctory duty and go ahead and approve this and move on.
So I'm going to call the roll, and we're going to vote on Phil's motion. Ms. Hartman.
Nay.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield, and I vote nay. Ms. Reynolds,
You're muted.
you're muted.
No.
Ms. Ortner,
No.
Mr. Swain,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
No.
Ms. Zoll,
No.
Mr. Patel,
No.
Mr. Packard.
I'll vote no, just hoping the select board can manage this better.
Mr. Hickling.
No,
Okay, so the motion fails, and we need a different motion for something to be done here.
I'll move.
Mary, what's your motion?
I move that the Finance Committee approve a budget transfer of $333,000 from the library to the town to cover $291,000 of legal, $22,000 of elections and registrars, and $20,000 for town meeting.
Second.
We have a couple of seconds. So any discussion on this motion?
So I'd just like to say one quick thing, Mr. Chairman, and that is I can sympathize with the frustration that the select board and town council has had on this issue, but we've spent the better part of 2 years trying to prevent this from ever happening to us. So the frustration is mutual.
Okay. So any more comments on this motion? Okay. We'll take a roll call. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm the chair of Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
No.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Packard.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Okay, it is not unanimous. We have one nay, but it passes. Okay, we can move to our next
Mr. Banfield,
agenda item. We're making great time here this evening.
Mr. Banfield,
Pardon me?
Mr. Banfield,
Yes, sir.
could I just quickly thank you for approving that? And I appreciate the discussion that you've all had on this. Again, I just want to reiterate that the select board is very mindful of these expenses, and these expenses are not something that has come as a surprise or a shock to us. It is just expenses that we have been forced to incur to continue to support the town's position. So I greatly appreciate all the time you've spent concerning yourselves about this issue and the various points of view that you have expressed. And I will just say on behalf of the board that we will continue to work hard to keep the cost under control and to pursue what we believe to be the best interest of the town. And I thank you very much for your support.
Mr. Banfield, if I may, before I leave, let me say
Sure.
thank you as well for the same reason. And we look forward to working with the board and you to make sure that you have a better sense of this going forward as well.
Thank you both. So we're going to move on to our next. Agenda item, and that is a revolving fund budget adjustment for the regional housing services. We have some paperwork in our packet this evening from Liz Rust. I don't know if she is on the call. Yes, she is. So if she can be promoted in the event that she wants to give us some information about that. Otherwise, it's a relatively straightforward item. They're looking for a modest budget adjustment. Liz, would you like to say something to promote your request?
Hello, how are you? Good evening, everybody. I think that the request is pretty self-explanatory. So we come to, in the way the Regional Housing Services Office works is we set the expending limit, and then through the year, some towns require more services. So they essentially purchase more hours from our office. And that happened a few times this year, as well as Lincoln joined mid-year after the spending limit was established. So those towns have already submitted those funds, and this just increases the spending limit for the staff to perform the work that's been done.
Sounds, Mary.
Liz, hi. Does this increase the amount that Concord pays?
No.
Okay.
No. And the funds have already been received. This was really from,
I thought so.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions about this? Okay, I guess we're ready for a motion on this. What's the number that we need in the motion? Hold on here. So.
An increase of $20,000.
Increase of 20,000. There's a whole bunch of numbers in this memo.
Make a motion to approve an increase of $20,000.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I think we're kind of discussed out at the moment. So I think we're going to take a roll call. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds.
Yes.
Ms. Ortner.
Yes.
Mr. Jameson.
Yes.
Ms. Zoll.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Mr. Packard.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Swain, you're muted. Still muted.
James.
He may have walked away. I
Still
don't
licking his wounds.
know. Okay.
We need an egg timer, Mr. Chairman.
We'll take that as an abstention. I think it passes on I so declare. Okay. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay. Here's my agenda here. Back to my agenda. Okay, next up on our agenda is a town meeting update. So there's a few things here that I need to give you some feedback on. Since we last met, Mike Lawson sent a note to me and Mary with a strategy that's been talked about and is now being executed with the assistance of the moderator. And that is to try to pare down the meeting. We're still looking at having the meeting in September. The moderator had a very elaborate description of how she wants to conduct it. September 12th, 9 a.m. on the Doug White Fields. There's a big discussion of that. If you go back to the tape of the select board meeting, that's where that's been described. The last select board meeting went into that in great detail. But between now and then, the moderator is very much looking to find ways to reduce the scale of the meeting in how much time it takes us to get through the meeting. There's a lot of different things we can do. One is to make sure that anything that can get onto the consent calendar and legitimately be on the consent calendar can be passed on the consent calendar. Another is to have individual committees who are proposing articles look at their slate of articles and determine whether or not a particular article really is urgent and needs to be done, or could it be, deferred to a future town meeting. The planning board's already gotten back to the select board with their list. The moderator has gotten on with with her proposal for a consent calendar, and the select board is going to go through a process of looking at the articles they're putting in. The moderator has also reached out to all of the citizens who have brought citizen petition articles, asking whether or not they would be willing to defer their articles. So, and there's a mixed bag of responses there. It's not all one way or the other. When we can assemble that group of priorities, Mary and I are invited to sit down with the chair and the clerk of the select board, along with the moderator, and the five of us will go through this grouping, and then we are intent on having a joint meeting of the finance committee and the select board to try to, come up with a finalized list. That meeting of the five of us will be a public meeting. So anyone who wants to watch, we're not going to have citizen comment. It's just going to be a discussion between the five of us. And that's the essential strategy. Figuring out what is essential for the community that really needs to be, what businesses needs to be conducted at town meeting. So that's the first piece of this. The next piece of it, which really gets into our business, is how are we going to adjust our behavior in order to meet the September 12th deadline. So the September 12th town meeting. If you remember last meeting we had, I had put up a chart showing what might be a proposed schedule, and it was about a 1 month. We'll get a 30-day notice of when, on August 12th, or somewhere in August, we'll get notice from the moderator that, okay, this is the scheduled date for the meeting, and now we have to assemble our best information. Now, since the moderator is working in a proactive way, months in advance, we do have advanced time to figure this out. We don't have to compress the schedule based on the legalities of a 30-day notice for the meeting. We can certainly work ahead, but we need to review our guidelines. We need to we really ought to conduct an abbreviated hearing on any revised town budgets, school budgets, and anything else. And I have a apology to one of the citizen petitioners whose article did not make any of our hearings. We left it off by mistake. It's our fault. We overlooked it. Brian Folds had Article 30, which is the Healthy Buses article, and it didn't come on the first one, which had other articles that were kind of a catch bag in the first one. It seemed to be an appropriate one to put in with the schools because it's about school buses, but then it was left off that hearing. It was not, we didn't hear it. So he needs to be heard, but we also need to, so after we do the guidelines revisions or any, revisiting of the guideline, we need to hold a hearing on the revised budgets that are going to be presented. And we'll tuck Brian Folds' Article 30 in with that hearing. Then we need to publish a Finance Committee report, and that's got to be in the hands of the public by no later than like August 29th or something like that. It's got to be 2 weeks ahead of town meeting. So we got to do work in August. There's going to be some serious work going on. A lot of people go on vacation in August, so that's just a scheduling issue that we're going to have to face up to. And the more we can do early, the better off we are. So that's pretty much it. So that's my update. Mary, is there anything you want to add to that? I think that's pretty much covers the.
No, you got it. You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Any comments on that? Anybody? Now, one thing that's kind of a benefit, although it's sort of a negative, if you're on vacation and now that we're doing everything by Zoom, you can join those meetings from wherever.
No excuse.
Mr. Banfield,
Yay!
So if you see like a lake behind me, that would be fine.
Mr. Banfield, can I make a remark?
Yes.
So thank you very much. I just want to say a couple things that have happened just since very, very recently. As Dean mentioned, we'll be meeting on Monday, and we will be discussing all of the articles that are select board articles. And once we've completed that, we will then have had a review of all the warrant articles, and I will put together a preliminary draft of the proposed consent calendar and all of those articles that are viewed as non-essential that will serve as a basis for the meeting that Dean talked about between Dean, Mary, Linda, and myself, along with the town moderator. The newest wrinkle in that, though, as Dean mentioned, the planning board has provided input onto what articles they believe are essential. But it happens to be the case that if an article is postponed at town meeting or is not moved at town meeting, that is essentially the same as no action or a negative vote on the article. And for planning board articles, if such action would take place, it cannot be brought to town meeting again for 2 years. So we are exploring an option which is called retraction. And I don't have enough detail yet to provide a lot of information, but the word itself should probably give you an indication. So instead of not moving an article or postponing an article to some town meeting in the future, we're exploring the ability for zoning articles to essentially retract them from the warrant. And then if and when we get a special town meeting sometime later in the fall or early in the spring or whenever it is, those articles could be again put on that meeting. So a slight wrinkle to that.
Is there, not to throw another monkey wrench in, could they be moved and then just placed on the table?
No, if they're postponed or if they are withdrawn or not moved, that is equivalent, according to town moderator, of a negative vote.
Okay.
And therefore cannot be brought to town meeting for 2 years. So we're exploring that. The other thing that, as Dean mentioned, the citizen petition articles have been mixed in terms of willingness to postpone them to a special town meeting. The select board will try to help with that on Monday. We will propose that any citizen petition article that is postponed until a special town meeting will not require any additional signatures or refiling by the petitioner, but the select board will simply adopt them as select board articles. So that might be helpful to some of the petitioners. They won't have to go out and get articles, and they'll know that it'll be contained. So after the select board meeting on Monday, I will prepare this document that outlines our approach to the warrant articles, and I'll be in touch with Dean and Mary to schedule that preliminary meeting. And that really, as Dean said, is just a preliminary meeting to kind of get us going and see what we can get organized. Because when we get together with select board and the finance committee, it's a very large group. And, you know, as much help as we can to kind of get it organized would be probably helpful. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I don't have anything further to add on this, but I think we should endeavor to publish a schedule. Mary and I will talk about a schedule that would make sense, possibly late July, early August, where we're working on a guidelines meeting and setting up a hearing or something like that. Having a hearing in the middle of August is not the best thing for public hearings. It's just not the best time. So we'll have to figure out when we can have a hearing or what would make sense, but we also need to understand what the budgets are that, what the budget adjustments are going to look like that are going to be brought to the meeting. So it's a lot of jigsaw puzzle pieces that we need to figure out how to snap them into place and when, because at some point you got to throw you got to just say, this is the fixed point in the universe. These are the budgets. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about them and let's have a hearing on it. We need to, and we've been, playing with silly putty at this point. It's very difficult, very challenging for us. Okay. Next item up is Finance Director.
I have a question.
Yes, Chris. What's up, Chris?
Dean, do we have hard dates from the town or the schools on when they can submit budgets to us?
Still, well, I heard that they were going to get information from the state, I think, which came out today. But I heard July 15th was, actually, I shouldn't have brought that up. I don't know what they promised on July 15th. Never mind.
So Dean, nobody has given you dates to say we're going to give you a budget.
We don't have right now we're in this 1/12 budget model where the finance committee is kind of backed away from the table, but they're just kind of going month to month.
Carrie might know.
One of the variables, and Carrie may speak to this in her finance director's report, is going to be the first quarter tax receipts and how that is looking. She sent an email out that was quite positive about fourth quarter tax receipts being, having come in at a very nice number in the 99% plus range. So I think right now we don't have any firm dates on when, revised budgets will be available or when we'll put
so as you and Mary look at the schedule, I assume that's part of the information you'll be gathering.
Right.
When can they provide us
data? To have some point at which we say, let's put a stake in the ground and call it this date, and let's work with a budget. Let's create a budget as of this date.
Right.
That's what we're going to have to do.
I know that from listening to the school committee meetings, I know that I think Dr. Hunter is planning on talking to them in, I think, early August or something. So they're starting to, come back with what their dates are. So, okay.
I think the July 15th, Mary, date was the day the governor was going to clarify a number of aspects of the state budget, is what I think.
Oh, the state budget.
The state was.
Okay, but not the school guidelines for opening in the fall, because that's.
Oh, no, that happened today.
Right.
That happened today, right.
Right,
Yeah.
that did happen today, but I don't know when the school admin or in the school committee are going to be able to quantify what that meant.
Yeah. I think in the last meeting, she's thinking, I thought she made a comment, I'm sure it's still fluid, but that they were hoping to be back to the board in the school committee, I should say, in early August. So that's something you guys can figure out, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, we got to find that out.
All righty. So, Carrie, you're up.
So I, late this afternoon, distributed a one-page document. If you would like, I could share that on the screen, or...
I think that would be helpful, Carrie, because it did come kind of late in the game. And
yeah.
I did have a chance to glance at it, but so.
Oh, my goodness. You can't see it yet, can you?
Yeah.
We saw it for a second.
Yeah, swimming pool.
Who's that?
That's my son.
Let's go.
Butterfly.
It's not that either. Oh, boy. Hold on. I'm not trying to brag.
Is that,
Brad, go ahead.
Now,
There it
There
is.
you go.
There it is.
There it is.
Last five.
There you
All right.
go.
That's it.
Okay,
Right there.
Okay, so I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with the town manager, and first on the list will be coming up with a date when we can return a revised budget to you. So as soon
Thank
as we have that conversation, I will let you know. I just wanted to give you an update on what things look like now. In terms of revenue, I'm still looking at about a $3 million reduction in revenue. I think we're really probably at $2.5 million to $3 million. And I arrive at that by a revised estimate for state aid. So I'm at this point assuming a 20% reduction in Chapter 70, which is education funding, and 25% reduction in unrestricted general government aid. Together, that is a net reduction of $1.3 million. I can tell you, we haven't heard anything out of the governor's office or the legislature. I know there are many towns in the area that went ahead and had their town meeting and approved their fiscal 21 budget. And I've heard everything from level funding their state aid to a reduction of 25%.
Cool.
We're really at the conservative end of that. So I think we're probably in good shape, but that will mean a reduction of $1.3 million. In terms of local receipts, I'm expecting a reduction of about $1.2 million. That's about a 15% reduction. And most of that we're expecting to come in a loss or a big reductions in meals tax, in rooms tax, and building permits.
Carrie, when will you know that?
So we did just hear earlier this week that the governor extended the deadline for filing meals tax and room occupancy tax, as well as sales tax. Anything that was due or will be due between March and August is now not due until September. So typically businesses are paying monthly.
Yeah.
So we're not going to
We're not going to know.
Not gonna
Okay.
know.
We're not gonna know. So that one to me feels soft, right? We don't, I mean, you had everything closed, right? From middle of March through the end of June. So 15%, how do we come to that?
Well, I would say it's soft. I'm expecting we will receive our fourth quarter meals tax, rooms tax payment from the state at the beginning of July. So there will be something, or I'm assuming there'll be something, because we have had some restaurants that were open. So I will revise this number again after we receive our return at the beginning of July.
Okay. My recommendation, I guess, to the group is to create a range for that number, because 15% sounds low to me, given that everything was pretty much shut. So.
The next line there, Chris, is 500K buffer, which is just.
Oh, right. Okay.
There it is.
Yep.
I think that kind of helps you. That gives you that range.
It does.
And,
Okay.
and so 15% is the reduction in local receipts in total. The reduction in meals tax and rooms tax is much higher as a percentage.
So how much, so I'm a little bit with Christine. I'm kind of curious, how much are we assuming that receipts are going to decline, Carrie? Because between July, August, September, the restrictions on occupancy and people, I think, fearful of what might happen in a second wave, I agree that seems to be low, and even the 500K buffer, I just feel uncomfortable with.
Well, I'm not asking you to act on this now. I just am presenting this as an assumption at this point in time that will be revised again before we come back to you for recommendations on guidelines or supporting budget.
So Carrie, what percentage of this number is coming in from like car taxes, excise taxes on cars and stuff like that? Just, personal property.
So we in the current fiscal year, we have about $8.5 million in local receipts. About $3 million of that comes from motor vehicle excise tax. And we don't foresee any big issue with motor vehicle excise tax collections. The meals tax, rooms tax is probably about $800,000 combined in fiscal 20. And I would assume we'll probably see closer to $600,000 combined once we add in that fourth quarter payment. So it is down significantly. And we expect that to be even lower in fiscal 21 because of the closures. We do have state aid through the CARES Act. $1,693,000 has been earmarked from the over $2 billion that the Commonwealth is receiving from the federal government. There is a potential that we are able to use that funding to offset lost revenues. We're still awaiting a final decision on that, but that is a possibility.
Sorry, Carrie, do you know the timing on that funding?
So the first round is available to us. We're submitting at the end next week, and we have about $350,000 worth of expenses in fiscal 20 related to COVID-19 pandemic response. So the balance of that would be available for fiscal 21. And again, we're waiting to hear whether or not that can be used to supplement lost revenue. On the expenditure side, there is some benefit to having town meeting later in the year because we're able to replace some of the estimates with actuals. We did the 2020 bond issue last month. And as a result of the bond issue, now that we can plug in the actual debt service payments for this new bond issue, we're able to reduce the budget by $138,000. So that is significant. We had to put in an estimate for health insurance. Our health insurance plans renew on June 1st. So now we're able to take out both our premiums, our known premiums for the upcoming fiscal year, plus our known enrollment. And we expect that to produce about $200,000 in savings. So we would be able to account for that. I also mentioned that even if Article 7, the retirement COLA base, is approved, it won't impact fiscal 21. That was a question that we had, and we finally resolved that. So we had a placeholder of $309,000 for fiscal 21. We can pull that out. As I mentioned when we were talking about the budget adjustments, we've had some of our operation that has been fully closed or partially closed over the last 3 months. And so there's budgetary savings in fiscal 20 that both on the town side and on the school side. And there is a process to recapture that. And this is something that's new, but in Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020 that was approved back in May, there is a provision that allows towns to access their current free cash certification if they were prevented from adopting their fiscal 21 budget as a result of the state of emergency. So to use that as a source of funding. So when we close fiscal 20, we will close with a surplus that is higher than we would typically see because of the savings, because of the closures. That will become part of our free cash, we wouldn't typically have that available to appropriate because it will not have been certified by the time of town meeting. But due to the extraordinary circumstances, the state is allowing us to access that funding if we so choose to help offset fiscal 21. I don't like the way that that looks or explaining it. What makes more sense to me is this second option that we are attempting to work with our legislative delegation to get a bill filed that would actually amend Chapter 44, Section 33B, which would extend the time period by which town meeting can reappropriate unspent prior year budget. Right now, the law says you have to do that by June 30. We've asked our legislative delegation if they would be willing to file either in the House or the Senate or both to extend that to December 31st. We've talked that through with the Mass Municipal Association, and they are supportive of this request as well. So,
Harry, can I ask a question? Is that just for Concord, or is it broadly to any municipality? And then second of all, is it a one-time proposal, or is it, for moving forward in the future?
so it is presented as a change, not as a local option, not specific to Concord, that it would be available to any community that wanted to use it. And the way it's presented, it's not one time. It would be to permanently change the law. And we feel that by broadening it, you get more interest in it. And the Mass Municipal Association is far more interested in supporting this change than to a home rule petition that would just be effective.
I was just asking out of curiosity. I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
So we do expect that there will be some savings on in the town's fiscal 20 budget and the school's fiscal 21 budget. That has yet to be quantified, but as soon as that's known, that is potentially another source that would help close the gap in fiscal 21.
So we don't really have any idea, Carrie, as to what the order of magnitude of those savings might be?
We're still in the process of closing. I would say we're between $500,000 and $1 million. On the school side, I really couldn't tell you, but I would be surprised if it wasn't similar.
Well, so John, on the school side, they're able to carry forward some things through their own budget process. So we talked earlier about how they're going to prepay the purchase of computers. Normally they would have bought them, after June 30th, but they're going to buy them now. And they can also move to pay tuition for out-of-district school tuition that they know. So they have a couple of different levers to take any unspent monies and essentially prepay 2021 expenses. And they've already started doing that. And those amounts are not insignificant, Carrie, based on what I saw from Jared's memo. It's a couple $1 million, right?
Right.
So it was like 1 million at the district and like 800,000 at CPS, or maybe those are reversed. They're big numbers.
They
are. They're big numbers. Which is good. It's good.
Yeah, the district they can keep it within the district by paying OPEB. They have a lot of options at the district, but I don't think CPS has quite as many.
You're right. That's right. Yeah.
So.
And some of it, just so if they don't, so they also are looking at what they have a cap on E&D.
Right.
And when they go above it, it comes back to us. And I think there's going to be money that comes back to us as well.
Well, I think they're trying to kind of avoid that.
Yeah, no, they are. They are, but they might. It
could happen.
A lot of money.
They're gonna max their E&D, and then I think their next goal would be to pay more into OPEB than they had budgeted to pay, and then it's okay. It's still you know, it doesn't come back, but it's a good thing happens, you know, OPEB gets paid down a little bit. So that's helpful.
Distinguishing a future liability is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. So, yeah.
But we will have to talk a little bit about that, right? Because the offset is going to be to the taxpayer, right?
It is. That's
Right.
true.
So it's nice to pay down OPEB, but if it forces us to raise the rate too much, we may go back to them and say, yeah, that's money that can come back to the town. So I think that'll be a discussion item.
That's reasonable. Yep.
The one other item that we talked about at the last meeting is additionally our cash capital, our fiscal 20 cash capital. We do have some significant balances in that because we've had a limited ability to carry out projects and make purchases that were planned for. And so we are able to encumber those funds and carry them forward and then likely reduce the new ask for fiscal 21.
Okay.
So that's something else that would help to close the gap between the current level of expenditure that's been asked and the reduction in revenue. I did also want to update you in the event that you didn't hear, the select board approved monthly budgets under the 1/12 law for July, August, and September. We submitted July. We can only submit 1 month at a time. We did submit July to the Department of Revenue and received approval on June 11th. And here's what the approval is itemized between municipal expenditures, school expenditures, and the enterprise fund expenditures. So that's what we're seeing now. Again, starting tomorrow, I'll be working with the town manager to put together a timetable on when we can bring a revised proposal back to you.
Any other questions or comments from the peanut gallery?
Thank you, Kerry. That's a very helpful update.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kerry.
Okay. All right. That's our next agenda. Let's see if I can find my agenda. No, I put it where it might be here. Here we go. That's not it. What? Siri thought I was asking for, okay. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the nomination of officers. So I have a report to make. At our last meeting, we had, I've lost track of everybody. There we all are. At our last meeting, we had formed a nominating subcommittee for officers for FY21. The group was Carl Packard, Tom Tarpey, and I. The three of us met twice since our last meeting. At the first meeting, we discussed a potential slate and then charged me with calling each of the people on the potential slate and saying, the rest of the team has stepped backwards one step. Would you be willing to do the job that it seems to be that you're standing in that spot for? I got approvals from each of the people that I talked to. So without further ado, the nominating subcommittee by a unanimous motion of the committee nominates the following slate for officers for the FY21 period, FY2021 period. Mary Hartman, nominee for chair. Chris Reynolds, nominee for guidelines chair and vice chair to the chair. John Hickling as the clerk for the chair, and Parshar Patel for the clerk of the guidelines chair. And that is our nominee slate. I need a motion to approve that slate, and then we'll discuss. A second?
Second.
Second, Andrea seconds. Okay. Any discussion on that slate of officers? Seeing none, I'm going to take a roll call. Ms. Hartman.
Yes.
I'm the chair, Dean Banfield. I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Ms. Ortner,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
Yes.
Ms. Zoll,
Yes.
Mr. Packard,
Yes.
Mr. Swain,
Yes.
Mr. Hickling,
Yes.
Mr. Patel. Yes, I guess. I didn't hear you muted, but I think
Oh,
we'll
he's,
count that as a yes. It's unanimous, and we have a slate. Now, at this point in the year, these people would have all assumed these roles, but I don't know when I could step back. So we're going to carry on with me as the chair until we get some sort of understanding. We are not out of the cycle of the FY21 town meeting and blah, blah. So we're going to need to figure this out. I don't know when we're going to roll. I think we do need to maybe have some sort of simultaneous parallel activity. We need to work on the SGR for the coming year, which may be a fool's errand. I don't know. We need to, talk about getting a set of letters out that normally go out at the end of July. Those are usually sent out to the town and start the guidelines process for the following fiscal year, and we won't have even closed out this fiscal year. So we're in this very kind of nebulous space where two things are happening at once. We're trying to close out one town meeting while we're trying to get ready for the next one. So we're going to have to figure that out. But we have a slate of officers with great capabilities, and I'm sure we'll all be able to muddle through. So thank you all. Thank you all for volunteering. It's good work. It needs to be done, and the town appreciates everyone who's willing to step into these roles. So thank you all. Okay.
question.
Yeah.
Sort of on the same line, but do we have any new members coming?
That's a good question. I don't think we have any who are proposed yet. I know that the moderator has gotten one person to re-up. So usually you have a certain number who are rolling off and a certain number who are, and so having somebody re-up is a way of filling a slot for the next year. I know one person has said they would re-up. I think there are 2 slots for which names are necessary. Mary, is that your understanding? I believe that's kind of where we
I
are.
thought we had 2 people re-up.
We did? Oh,
I
good.
thought so, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I think the moderator's working on it, and we are welcome to give suggestions. I've got one suggestion for maybe a couple of years out, but it's not good for now because the person's working on other committees, so that's probably not going to work. I don't have any other brilliant ideas right at the moment, but I know that the moderator is open to suggestions for people with financial, legal, and basic business acuity. Local business owners would be good to have on here because that's an area that is sometimes underrepresented on the finance committee or local business owners. So, okay, there's our officers. So observer reports. This is a brief list. Others are TBD, but I think that there's a survey for the StarMet property that was conducted by that committee. Does anyone have an observer report for that committee?
They're going to present to the Council on Aging. And the Council on Aging is trying to settle on a Zoom meeting date coming up. And there'll be a presentation on the StarMet property at that time. And I'll be there.
Okay.
Dean,
Yes, Mary.
my understanding from Gary Kleinman was that there were going to be 2 surveys. One was going out to the general public and one was going to to committees. So someone should probably follow up with Gary, and I don't know who's our liaison to, what is that? I don't even know what the committee
I don't know. Do we have a liaison to this?
Okay.
The Long Range Planning Committee?
I'm not sure.
No, I think
No, it's something like the 222 Main Street or something.
yes.
Oh, StarMet.
That last year.
StarMet.
Star Met. But
Yeah.
somebody should reach out to him and ask him how he's going to collect feedback from the committees.
Okay. All right. Let's put that on the to-do list. I'll take that on. I'll reach out to Gary Kleiman.
Great.
The school committee has been very active. They've been meeting weekly. I was able to follow up on their meetings of 5/26, 6/2. I think Chris had dropped in on the last one, so she has a little bit of an update there. I'll give a little bit of an update. They're working through what they're calling phase 4 of how they do, remote learning and how that's going to work in the fall. They're trying to create an advisory committee to advise them on how to go forward with that. I know that Dr. Hunter is working on multiple avenues for that. In order to sort of improve their budgetary posture, the superintendent proposed that they revisit their early retirement program. And then that was met with a positive response from the committee. She went out and surveyed other communities. Is anybody else doing anything like this? And she also surveyed the unions and some of the members of the unions, and got kind of a tepid response from one of the unions, but I believe that the CPS union had a more positive response, but it wasn't strong enough to push. And most people wanted to sort of hang through and see, well, how is this next year going to develop? How is this new learning experience going to work? So they've decided to table that. They're not going to pursue it, but they did have some pretty big numbers. They felt that they could, over the course of 5 years, get anywhere from, at the CPS level, anywhere from $200,000 to $450,000 per year in savings. It kind of, their charts kind of bubble up and down. They go all over the map, but in certain years, they're saving over $400,000 by an early retirement plan. Not as robust savings from CCRSD. A significant thing, there was an article in the Boston Globe about this that was substantial, was many school districts, as of June 15th, are faced with a hard deadline where they must tell their employees, you are not necessarily going to be asked to come back in fall. And so there were a lot of districts that had basically riffed an enormous number of people. Clearly, and they're going to still need the people to come back, but they just weren't in a position to know. And so they were riffing an enormous number of people with the intent of letting them flap in the breeze during the summer and then saying, okay, we really do need you, or this is how the new year is going to face. Because our collective bargaining agreements have the equivalent of a force majeure clause in them, there is some latitude, and we did not have to get into a very widespread pink slipping of a number of employees just to put us in a posture where we can be flexible. The unions both agreed that it would be okay if we all sort of just navigate forward and try to delay anything like that until there's more clarity. So that was a good thing, that the collective bargaining agreements had enough flexibility in them to allow for that. So that was good. And so that's pretty much it. They're working through the 1/12 budget process, and I'm going to leave it at that. Mary and Chris have watched other meetings, so you guys can fill in.
Yeah, as you said, Dean, they've put together a task force actually to figure out what's it going to mean to reopen in the fall, if in fact they do reopen. And the school is really facing some challenges. They've got issues around food service, they've got issues around transportation, they've got issues around having to have simultaneous online learning while kids come back to school. So, getting that all laid out and quantifying that is a real challenge for them. And I'm just thinking it's going to be that some of the things they're going to be required to do are going to be quite expensive. That's my first take. But they're looking at it, and like I said, Court Booth is on that, is the school committee member on that task force, and we should be hearing from them soon. The other thing they talked about was they have a $900,000 capital request on this year's warrant that the school committee did not take a vote, but the administration was very clear that they didn't really need that these are for some kind of air exchanges on the Ripley building, and that the air quality was okay, and they could probably delay that without suffering any bad consequences for at least a year. But like I said, they have not voted on that. So there's a $900,000 capital that might be deferred. And the other thing is that, like I said, the guidelines came out from the governor today as far as the guidelines and they're going to have to flesh that out and figure out what that means for them. Anyway, that's what I've heard in the last few meetings I've attended. What about anything, Chris, that I missed?
Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion. This is really at the regional level.
Yep.
Because Carlisle went ahead with their town meeting and we didn't. And so there was a lot of discussion about, well, how do we manage that? And my understanding is that they already held it. I think they held it last week, that they essentially voted on some minor things, but they held off on the regional budget for a later meeting. So they accomplished, there were some things that they wanted to get done. I think that they had some time pressure around, maybe some capital items that they needed to do something on, but then they held the rest, or they voted essentially to hold the rest to a later time. So we are not out of sync with Carlisle in terms of the regional budget, which was one of their goals, which is a good thing. And also at a similar discussion, the regional committee asked Dr. Hunter to prepare 3 budgets. 1, assuming 100% remote, 2, assuming a blend, and 3, assuming we can all come back to school.
I think that's also what the governor came out with too.
Exactly. So that was good advice. So I know this was over a month ago. So that's where they were heading. So I think they'll have some flexibility now to come back and show us here's the range of what it could cost.
Yeah, I just want to make an editorial comment. The admin, Dr. Hunter and Jared are always ahead of the game. I mean, they're always thinking ahead of, they're thinking of things before they even get guidance. So I'm impressed with the work they're doing. Just put that out there.
Dee, you had your hand up?
No.
Nope. Okay. I don't know if there are any more. The select board has been, they've been doing the blocking and tackling of basic functions of the town, getting committee assignments, getting things done that help enable businesses to be functional, like, getting the 80 Thoreau an outdoor seating license, and then recognizing that there are numerous other restaurants, they handed that responsibility off to the town manager. So they've been just making sure that the town is just doing what it needs to do, at the same time approving these 112 budgets and working through that. So let's move on to, let's see, we are at 8. Yep.
Wait, I didn't have my hand up before, but I have my hand up now because I just wanted to give you an update on the Capital Planning Task Force.
Okay.
That has been quiet for quite some time. We asked for an extension and received an extension from the select board so that whatever report we come up with would be due by June 30th, 2021. And Todd Benjamin, who was our chair, had to step away from the committee or from the task force. So there will be a new chair for the task force. And then there is an opening for a citizen representative to be on the task force. So if you know anyone who might be interested in working on the Capital Planning Task Force, please have them contact Terry Ackerman.
Okay.
Hey, is there a new date for a hearing?
Not at this time. We don't even have a date yet for our next Zoom meeting.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question. Dee, is the charge the same? It's just an extension of the existing charge, or?
My understanding is the charge is the same. And it's just an extension.
Okay, thank you.
And Peter Fichel's not on the call, so I'll try to pitch in and give a little update on the school building committee. as we understood from the last time we met and they attended, they have stood down, but they are still waiting for the final draft report from, it may have come in, they literally have quiesced their meetings. So I don't have great visibility, but they're waiting for their designers to come back and give them a draft feasibility study. The feasibility study cannot be formally closed out because it requires public comments and hearings, et cetera, and they can't really conduct that reasonably while we're in this mode. So that's just going to be called a draft for the time being, but I don't even think they have that finalized yet. So that's kind of where they are with that. Still waiting. Okay, I think we can move on to.
Dean, I have kind of an important update on Minuteman, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah, all right.
If you want to do other committees, but.
No, it's fine. I
Okay.
was trying to kind of limit this, but I think that's
I
fine.
know.
Yeah.
This I'll do be quick. It's an
Okay.
important one. So one of the things that was assumed in Minuteman's new high school was that they would use monies that were left over from the construction fund to build athletic fields. And now that the work is done, they've sort of figured out how much money they have left. And they have, for the past, I don't know, 2 months or so, been really working through some ideas on how to spend that, how to have athletic fields. Because if they don't, they're just going to have a big pile of dirt where the old building was, which has now been demolished. It's virtually all gone now. So they approved on this past Tuesday a plan to spend $6 million on athletic fields, including softball, soccer, lacrosse, baseball. It's 3 synthetic fields, so 3 turf fields. And the funding for that is $4.1 million out of the remainder of the construction fund. So money that was left over from the bond offerings. They have about $600,000 that they will collect from rentals. So they will be able to, they have a rental revolving fund that they can use, that they will get some more, but they also have some. And they have a $1.3 million capital stabilization reserve. So between those 3 pieces, they're going to start to spend that money. So it doesn't look like there's any additional money that's going to be asked of us, but I wanted you to know that is being, that they voted to go forward with that on Tuesday.
So they're taking some money out of this rental fund that they have. Do they feel that having 3 fields, 3 nice new turf fields, is going to increase the inbound funds to that rental revolving?
Yes, they do.
They do.
They do. And they don't have, so they've sort of phased it out. So the 6 million, they had a series of items under consideration, and no matter what you did, you had to spend. So I think the cheapest option was $800,000 to just let it be a meadow. So they wanted, they consider sports as any high school would. The sport is, sports are important to the kids. So they wanted to come back with something that would allow sports, not just for the boys, but for the women as well. And this allows it because the fields that they have men and women teams on them. So I think it's a reasonable proposal. The thing that they don't have, so they don't have a big football field, they don't have bleachers, they don't have lights, right? So if this goes well, and they may come back, I would say, in a year or 2 and say, okay, and we've raised this much money, and now we want to, put some better lighting up, because the more you can use it, the more that rental revenue will go up.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
That's it.
Mary?
Christine, while we're on the topic of Minuteman, did they give you any updates on their operating budgets based on all the changes that are?
No, they're still, well, here's what happened. Because they're regional, as long as a majority of the towns had town meetings by June 30th, they're done. And I believe that happened. So even though Concord has not had a town meeting, their budget is approved. So they went with the 1/12 business. I think they started down that road, but I'll check with Steve, but I think they're kind of done in terms of, it's not that they won't change the budget, but in terms of, coming to us and saying, I think they have what they need. They will come back and they will have adjustments to the budget. They're still working on that, but the process is a little different for them because you're right. It's not a guideline, it's assessment. Maybe Carrie can tell me how that works, but it's a little different.
So that is upside down from what I had understood. What I had understood was if any one town, and Concord was threatening to be the only town,
Yeah,
did not conduct its town meeting and did not have an appropriation, that would force them into a 1/12 model until Concord.
yeah, that's not what I heard, Dean, but I can go back and confirm that because I remember there was discussion.
I
you know.
kind of felt like that's what they presented to us when they were sitting with us.
Really?
Yeah. But
I'll
maybe
go
not.
back and check because I sort of feel like they got what they needed. So I didn't think they needed 100%, but I'll find out. I'll
Okay.
find out.
Well, we've got an article that we might discuss tonight or not, Article 24,
Right.
which is what do we recommend the Finance Committee for their budget?
Right.
So this is kind of in line with that. And
Yes.
and I asked for this to be on our up for discussion as opposed to on our consent calendar,
Yep.
because I was actually kind of annoyed that they came in with a budget that was no different than they had presented to us way back when, before the world changed. So
Yeah.
they must be thinking about this.
They are, but I haven't heard from them when they're going to have a new number or not. But I'll go back to Steve and I'll confirm the bit of, what exactly are they going to ask us? Do you know, Kerry, am I right that the assessment is what the assessment is at this point?
It's different. It depends on their regional agreement, how their budget is adopted. Regional agreements typically are a majority of the members. Once they pass the budget, it's passed.
Yeah.
I tell you, our 1/12 plan assumes the FY21 assessment. We plugged that in because it was significantly higher than 20.
Right.
I certainly can shoot a quick email over to their finance director too and get back to you.
Okay, that would help. Yeah, see if I'm right. But that was my impression from listening to them.
So we're saying then that if more than half of the communities agreed to the assessment from Minuteman, then our vote really doesn't matter. We're just given this assessment as a member, not because we voted to accept it or approve it. Am I interpreting this correctly?
It's a non-guideline item, right, Carrie? I mean, we assume it, the town assumes it's an assessment, right? It's not
Right.
a school budget.
But why do we vote on it then never mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, if we could get some clarity on that, because we do have to make a recommendation and it's still on our list and I want to keep it on our list.
Yep.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, it is about 9 o'clock. And maybe we spend a half an hour, I didn't call it half an hour, we'll spend on talking about more articles to approve, just, have discussion and recommendations on. I think where we left off, and I've had a few emails from John Kratsley, the CPC is very much concerned about how things are going to shake out with our recommended letter. Just to follow up, last meeting, I was charged with writing a letter to the select board and the town manager to have them please reconsider all the line items in the capital Article 11 tagged as parks and playgrounds. I wrote that letter and I CC John Kratsley because the CPC is sort of tangled up in that with two of their articles for Giroux and for Warner's Pond dredging, which are tagged as parks and playgrounds. I had two conversations to follow up on that letter, one with the town manager who reached out to me and one with the director of natural resources. The town manager he understood where we were coming from, but has a strong sense that the town approved the first round of funding for Giroux, so why would we stop now, kind of was the sense that I received from the town manager. I don't want to misrepresent him, but that they're going to take it, he's going to take it under advisement. I don't know where they're going to come out on it. And then I spoke to the director of natural resources, who was, we'll just say, crestfallen that we were making this recommendation regarding the dredging, which is really a conservation item and not a parks and recreation item. The dredging, the purpose of the dredging is to clear out certain sections of the pond which are being silted over, and it's been underway. The project has been, kind of sidelined and reinvigorated with various fundings, mostly from the CPC, for many years, 4 or 5 years at least. And to have it be kind of lumped in with Parks and Rec, parks and playgrounds, she felt it was an unfortunate characterization, let's put it that way. So those are the conversations that I had since that letter went out. So, so I think we need to kind of finish off with what we, where we are on these two items to try to help the CPC make their recommendations. Oh, just to be another item to sort of add into that is that in the streamlining efforts that the select board is undertaking, the CPC was asked, is there anything on your chart of accounts that you would, think could be deferred? And the CPC came back and said, no, we don't see any real reason to defer it. The funding is there. So there's no inherent reason to defer this. This money has already been assessed, and it's coming to the town. So why are we going to decide to defer this? But there were some sentences in the letter that John Cratsley wrote back to the select board that said, we're still concerned about the two elements of our article that are tied together with, the Giroux property and the dredging. So, they're thoughtful about it, but I think their interest is to move their article as it's constituted. But they're interested in our take on it, and we sort of have left this. We've tangled them together, and now we have to either make some decisions or just move forward. I don't know what we would like to do. I haven't gotten any formal feedback from the letter, other than the conversation I had with the town manager. Yes, Dee.
I have a question first for you, and then I have a comment about the CPC article. My question is, have you received any feedback from the town manager on the parks, on the 5 areas of capital improvements? We asked them to evaluate or come up with their list.
As I said, I don't have any written feedback. I had a conversation which included a lot of back and forth between myself and Stephen Crane.
Okay.
I don't want to mischaracterize his position, but I'll do the best I can to represent it here as the town has approved these things in the past. Why would we stop this freight train now? It seems to have left the station. The town meeting approved the purchase of Giroux in the first place, and it approved some initial design work on a subsequent town meeting. And so the project has the backing of town meeting, and why would we stop? So
Okay.
that was kind of the sense that I received.
Okay, so along that line, and excuse me, Mary, I just want to get through some of this. Along that line tonight, Carrie was talking about under expenditures that there has been a delay in maybe some of the capital projects. I don't know if it has to do with Giroux or Warner's Pond or not. And that some of the, maybe some of the requests for next year would be taken off the table. Carrie, can you just narrow it down? Is there anything associated with the capital improvements and the parks and whatever that other word is, playgrounds and parks? Is there anything there about Giroux or Warner's Pond?
No, I mentioned the cash capital portion, so the departmental equipment and.
Oh, that, okay.
And, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Give you a little more
clarification.
insight into my conversation regarding cash capital. I more or less identified that stuff tended to be expenditures which were to keep the town
Yeah.
in a good state of repair, et cetera, and that I would defer to the town manager and the finance director to make those decisions. It wasn't really, we didn't want to get in there and meddle on that. And the other piece was that the town manager, one of the stronger things that the town manager said was that the playground item to fix the Emerson playground is
Right.
something that they really felt needed to be done, because they're not allowed to use wood chips underneath that little playground space anymore, and they need money to put like a rubberized surface or something like that. And so you don't want, that's in effect the same level of, we just got to keep this thing in an adequate level of repair and make it functional for the town. We don't want to have to shut it down because we're not allowed to use wood chips. So,
Okay.
there were some, advocacy for that. And but I don't have anything definitive from that.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'll go on to my comment about the CPC and the Giroux Park improvement and the Warner's Pond dredging. In our minutes from May 4th, if you go to page 3, it delineates and describes exactly what the CPC funding would be used for in the Giroux Park improvement. And they say the CPC funds would be used for bathrooms and trailers. So I think that that's a contained, controlled aspect of what goes on at the Giroux property. And then also at Warner's Pond, here the money is going to be, the $500,000 will be put in the bank in the account for the dredging project. Next year we'll see another, I think it's like $2 million coming up next year for the dredging project, because they have a budget right now, or they're anticipating $3 million for the dredging, Warner's Pond dredging. And the money in the CPC account is already there. It's not as though it's part of free cash that we'd be replenishing that amount. So I don't see any reason why we would take these off of the table for the CPC funding.
Go ahead, Mary.
You want me to go, or do you want to say?
Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I agree with Dee that I think that I am the one who actually wanted to couple these two together. And now I'm thinking we should decouple them, because the CPC, as they've said, and as Dee said, they have the money. They've done a great job of vetting these. And I would be okay with letting them decide if they want to, in fact, fund Giroux and Warner Pond for dredging and any other thing they have, because I don't want to second guess that committee. When it comes to the town's ask, though, for these projects, I have a different opinion. And I think what we were talking about was, we were talking about delaying some of these things because of the economic uncertainty. So it's more, we're not really sure what the economic outlook looks like. If we can delay some spending, it seemed like this would be the most appropriate place to delay. That's my first thought about delaying. And I think that's why we voted to have that letter written to ask to delay. I will say one other thing, though. I would feel more comfortable approving some of these or supporting some of these if I had a clear understanding of what the money is going to be spent for. Because CPC has a good delineation of what money is going to be spent for when it's allocated. But for the Article 11, I don't have that. So I don't think that when we either accepted gifts or when we bought property, we had blank checks. We give money or we appropriate more money as we know what it's going to be spent for. So those would be my two reasons to say that we should, in fact, delay spending for some of the recreation projects.
Are we talking about both of the articles or just the CPC article?
Well, I'm talking about both.
To a degree, these two things, we're sort of, this is what I said, we're tangled together a little bit here because they are funding. They're different buckets of money, but they're funding the same
projects, right?
So I have a question then. Dee, you've sort of characterized the CPC's $500,000 for Giroux Park improvements as sort of in its own silo, that this money is not to be merged with the money from Article 11 in order to accomplish all of that. I have not looked at, and I think it would probably play out if you were to look at the proposal that was written for the grant proposal for CPC, that the grant proposal, usually those proposals are written, we want this much CPC money to do this project, and we have this other bucket of money that we're either going to raise from donations, or in the town's case, we're going to allocate from a town appropriation in this warrant article, so that the full application includes all the funding that would fund what's being shown in the paragraph on page 3 there. So that's my understanding. If we were to look at that application, it would probably be that those things get done with both of those buckets of money. We want your 500,000, please, CPC. We're going to match that with the town's appropriation from its capital article. That's usually how those applications are written.
Well, I think that then we maybe would want to see the application or what the CPC has decided, because it seems to me it's quite clear from the minutes that they have stated that the funds would be used for bathrooms and trailers. Now, if the property has to be resurfaced or has to be changed somehow and at a cost that maybe is coming out from another bucket, then it's possible that the bathrooms and trailers couldn't, or trails couldn't be, not trailers, trails, couldn't be constructed.
But you see,
So I don't know how far we want to get into that.
well, I think I would like to see a budget put together by the people who are going to be doing the work that shows.
I really do think if we were to look at the CPC grant proposal, there would be a very detailed budget in there.
But
It
what
would
they want-
include the town's fund.
I think we'd see there what they want from the CPC, but what we wouldn't see is what they're going to spend the money from the town on. Because some of the things that are being talked about are things that aren't included in the CPC application.
Okay. Chris, you have your hand up a couple times.
Yeah, so my issue, which I think is what Mary was talking about. So if I understand it correctly, the CPC raises money separately. They have buckets of money that they can grant and spend. I assume if they don't spend it, that money doesn't come back to us to spend in the town.
No, it does not.
Okay, so I personally, if the CPC has a good reason to send something, I'm okay with that. My interest in these capital items is, we know we have a revenue shortfall. We may have expenditure growth in the schools. Don't know, we'll see. And in that situation, I wanna cut, as I want to know what discretionary spending I have, and I would consider the town spending on parks discretionary, or without better knowledge, it looks to me like it's discretionary, and it could be deferred if it needed to be, if we needed the money somewhere else. So that's why I look at it as, if they come back and say, guess what, the tax rate's going up, 25%, I'm going to say, well, maybe we're not going to do Jerome. There's a way to prioritize what we spend on, and that's what I was looking for, to go back to the town and say, are you sure you want to do this? Because we may need to cut some things. That was my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sounds right to me, Chris.
I think let's try to make some forward progress on our recommendations list. And to do that, let's take a look at the CPC article as a standalone item, which I've heard a few people mention that this, and myself included, that this money is appropriated. It is part of the money that's raised through the taxes that we all pay. It's a little surcharge on those taxes. So the money is there. Should we just have them spend it if that's what they want to do?
I move affirmative action on Article 44, community
That's right.
preservation.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that motion? No. Okay, seeing that, I think we're ready for a vote on, what's that article number again?
44.
Okay, so I'm going to call the roll. Ms. Hartman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dean Banfield, the chair, and I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Ms. Ortner,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
Yes.
Ms. Zoll,
Yes.
Mr. Packard.
Yes.
Mr. Patel, you're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Mr. Swain.
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous. So we are approving of all the expenditures on Article 44. Now let's return to our open discussion on Article 11. We had written a letter. We have modest feedback, really just to me through a phone conversation regarding that. And so there you go. There you go.
Dean, I would move that we defer this item until we see the town budget.
What-
There are
Can I ask why? I just want to understand why.
Yeah, because related to my earlier comments, I don't know how much pressure there is on the town budget or what we could do to the tax rate. So I don't want to approve, I don't know how I approve discretionary spending if I don't know that the schools and the town ops are taken care of. So I don't know how to vote on this one.
Yeah, can I make one comment on this? One thing about this is if we approve this bonding, the bonding probably will not hit the FY21 budget. It will probably end up in the 22 and out years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie.
22, fiscal 22 at the earliest.
Right.
So,
Okay.
we're looking
it
at.
doesn't roll
what we
into
can do
next
with
year's
this
budget.
No,
But,
no.
we're approving some future spending is just to put a different spin on the thing. I'm not trying to sell it. I'm just saying that's what it is.
Could be worse in 20.
Yeah,
It could be.
Could be worse.
It probably will be. It probably will be.
We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here. So,
I think, can I make a suggestion that we continue the conversation with the town manager and get a better feel for exactly, and this is, I would like to see a better feel for exactly how this money is going to be spent.
And what is discretion, prioritized.
And prioritize. That's a great, so, we're talking, I don't know, I think it's a little over $2 million to prioritize it and then give us a list, more explanation of how this money would be spent.
So, okay, so why don't we, Mary, you and I, have a three-way Zoom call with him or something. The two of us call him and talk to him.
Okay.
And because I do think it's appropriate for the town manager to at least, and maybe Carrie, you can be on that call, but to put some level of what's most important. We're asking for the deferral of 5 items. What's most important to him down through the least important thing. And
again, I keep emphasizing this. I'd like to know how the money is going to be spent. So just $600,000, is that for toilets? Is that for pavilions in the case of Giroux? For Warner's, how much dredging do you actually get done for $600,000?
Right.
For Emerson, is that just for the floor, for the playground? So I just a feel rather than just these lump sums given. I really like to know what.
So maybe the town manager will have Kate Hodges on the call just so that
That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
She's been kind of spearheading some of these things, and she can answer those kinds of questions, Mary. So that might
Great
be
idea. Yep.
Hey, this is Parashar. I thought on the May 4th meeting, there's a little table there where they talk about the fact that the $600,000 from the town funds would actually be used for, let's see, remove the lower parts of the property near the water, some recreation revolving funds. So they go, do you want a little bit more detail than what's in that table there?
Which table are you
Which table are you
talking
looking at?
Yeah,
Well,
it
I
was
don't
from the
know.
hearing, right? It was from
May
the hearing.
It's May 4th on page 3 of the May 4th minutes.
Yeah.
Now, if you
No,
want more information,
Those are the
that's fine.
CPC. Those are the CPC items, right?
Yeah.
But they
Yeah,
have a
that's-
reference to the town
That's
funds
not
too.
discretionary.
It does say though that this is going to, construction of the facility near the first
Where are you? I'm sorry.
located in Upper Ridge Land,
Page 3 of the
requiring additional.
minutes
Yeah,
from May
Page
4th.
of the minute.
oh, that's CPA. That's CPA fund.
Yeah, but what that does say in that paragraph really crystallizes what I had said earlier, which is that these things get done with this 500,000, but also with the 600,000 that the town is appropriating. That's what
Right.
these things happen because we have 1.1 million, not because we have 500,000 of
But
Jerome.
what directly affects our taxes is what's in the capital improvement budget, not the CPC.
Correct.
No, I understand, but it says Kate
No.
Hodges indicated that the town funds would be used to renovate the lower part. So she's talking about the town funds in that paragraph where it references the 500,000. So again, if you want more detail, Mary, I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
There is a little bit of sense there. And that raises the broader question for me. If we've said okay to the 600 there and the 500 there, and we ask them to rethink the money coming out of the town funds, are the two linked? And what does that say about the overall projects at both places? My question makes sense?
yes.
It
One
just-
of the things you can keep in mind is that sometimes when people come to the CPC, they bank the money for a while because it might be a longer project. And typically a project has to be performed within 30 months after they get after they're awarded the money. So I understand what you're saying, Parashar, but it doesn't mean that it should not mean that we don't approve the CPC, even if we don't approve the towns.
I'm actually saying the reverse, Dee. I appreciate what you said. I mean, we just went ahead and approved the CPC money, and then we're going to hold back on the portion that the town was going to provide. And what's the impact on the overall
Well,
project?
they may not be linked. Maybe that's part of this discussion with the town manager. You know, where are they so tightly linked that it affects the efficiency of doing the project?
Right, and that's a good question, I think, to probe, because I'd be concerned if we were to approve one but not the other, and if they're
Right.
linked, then what does it say?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
That's a good point. And you're right, Parashar. Thank you for pointing that out. That does shed some light on it.
Just a little bit, and
Yeah.
we probably want more.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so we are going to continue to table our discussion of Article 11 pending a conversation that Mary and I will have probably with Kate Hodges and the town manager. That we'll
And Carrie, unless she doesn't want to be there.
yeah, Carrie, you're welcome. We'll
Of
send
course I
you an
want to be
invite.
there.
You can just decline the invite if that's not
We want you there, Carrie.
All righty. Somewhere on my desktop, I have a list. Oh, it's next on our to-do list here. It is now, we have 11 minutes to get to 9:30. Is there something we can knock off here? I don't think we've talked about the Beatty. So that's something we could talk. I just don't see us making a lot of progress on the TIF article, number 16.
What about the 500K for affordable housing?
Okay, let's talk about that. We'll talk about that one. That's fine. Number
What's
14.
the number of that?
14.
Appropriate funds for affordable housing, article number 14. So this is this is something that we're on year 2 of this, or maybe year 3, where, we haven't gotten the legislature to approve our other forms of funding for the affordable housing in the community. I think we had some success with the first round of 500,000 because there was a property that became available, and it was some help from the Habitat for Humanity and the town funding. And I think CHDC, collaborating with the Habitat for Humanity, we were able to purchase a home, start to rebuild it from a 1-family into a 2-family. So the funding has shown some promise already in the previous year. And this is another year of going after we're coming in and dipping into our free cash to do it. But it's providing for the purpose that it's intended, it seems to be providing the right level attack. So any comments on this? Anybody want to lead it off, Mary?
I'll start. Yeah, you might remember I stood up last year and actually the Finance Committee voted no action on the first time this came in from a town meeting, and that was handily defeated.
Yes.
And to me that showed a commitment from the town to fund affordable housing. I've also been advocating for maybe this should be a budget line item, but the bad news with that is that once you put something in as a budget line item, it's hard to take it out again. So having it come out of free cash is at least a temporary. It has to be renewed every year as a temporary measure. So I'm tending to want to approve this because for the two reasons I just said. Number one, I think the town is behind it. We don't have another source of funding right now. And I also think that there's no other way to do it. The only other way I could think of is not as, a line item. Once you get a line item in the budget, it's really hard to take that out, whereas free cash has to be renewed every year. So I'm tending towards affirmative action.
I think one of the arguments against a line item in the budget is that it creates a big budget lift that makes the operating budget look like it's going up by an enormous amount when in fact you're saying actually this is something that the town needs to do. So that's another problem.
I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah.
It is a use of free cash, which I don't like doing.
I know.
Okay, I'm done.
Mary, I'm with you.
Chris,
The town has said it a couple times that they're committed to it and that we're committed to it as a town. So we might as well say yes.
Okay. Chris?
I'm okay, with the concept. My issue is similar with the last item. I don't know how I vote for what I'll call a nice to have until I know where I'm going to end up on the rest of the budget. So for me, I don't want to, I guess I would say yes, pending what learning more about what's going to happen to free cash once I understand what's going on with the town and the school budgets. That's my problem. I don't know how I say yes to this, and then I'm going to have to come back and say, yeah, well, maybe we should give them $250 because we have the tax rate going up too much. So that's where I get stuck on, Dean.
I have a hand raised here from Mike Lawson. Mike, do you want to say something?
Yes, not really to comment on your specific deliberation, but just to let you know that the transfer tax that is pending before the legislature was voted out favorably from the Revenue Committee. And this allocation of free cash was always meant to be a temporary phenomena until we had these two home rule petitions, the building permit surcharge and the transfer tax approved by the legislature. So some small progress has been made on the transfer tax, and frankly, there's been a very large consortium of towns that have also submitted legislation. So I'm kind of hopeful here, but I do hope you'll approve this for the upcoming year.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else want to weigh in? Okay, Dee.
Just a question to Carrie. How much do we have right now allocated of free cash of the decisions we've already made?
Oh,
Did I catch you, Carrie?
no, I just had that open to look at free cash, but I looked at a different aspect. So we have $1 million to reduce property taxes and this 500,000 for affordable housing.
And
Did we vote on the 2 million for the
the debt stabilization?
debt stabilization? Yeah. Didn't
Oh,
we
you
vote
did
on that?
Yeah.
Dean, it's very likely that debt stabilization for the middle school will be one of those articles that is postponed.
Interesting.
I thought they were recommending going ahead and
Put it,
building it up.
it's not going to be on the consent calendar, I guess. It can't be. Anyway, okay. That's unfortunate, but we can talk. We have our own desire to have us squirreling away money. That building is
Yeah.
we're gonna have that building.
Yeah, it puts us, if we start with that, then it puts us in a better position down the road.
Please don't misunderstand my comment. There's been absolutely no decision made about that.
That's fine.
So,
Okay. So to Chris's point, one of the earlier presentations that Carrie made to us a couple meetings back showed that our normal haul, which is usually to find somewhere around $500,000 in budgetary savings and another $500,000 in additional revenue, leads to $1 million that we typically then take out of free cash to reduce taxation. And this year that's not going to be the same because we have local receipts shortfalls, et cetera. So that calculation turned out to be only like 500,000 this year. And so, that's just another data point, shall we say, in where free cash is kind of leaking. Because we're not replenishing it. It doesn't appear as though we're going to replenish it at the same rate if those numbers hold, Carrie.
Right. No, I would agree.
So that's a different problem. Okay.
I think what Christine had said earlier about kind of wait and see. Do we have time to do that?
We don't have to make we don't have to make these recommendations now. If it makes sense to look at something and say we would do this one way or the other, we'll just do it, then we should make a recommendation. But if it seems as though a number of these are sort of balled together with sort of finalizing our operating budgets and understanding where our revenue projections are, et cetera, if we feel as though some of these could be deferred because we feel that they're not essential, then we certainly could consider that. Yes, Mary.
Yeah, I think right now I'm getting confused in my own mind between the non-essential versus things we might not support. So we might decide that for the September town meeting, we're not ready. We don't want to have this as one of the articles we consider because we don't know enough about how things are going to shake out. But later at a subsequent town meeting, special town meeting, that's when we might take up the conversation about whether we think this is a good use of free cash. I mean, there's really two opportunities here for us to move this forward. Did that make, so we could decide that it's not essential and hopefully the town agrees with us, and that would push it off until the special town meeting. Did that make sense, Dean?
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the timing between the September annual town meeting, a possible special, and then the future town meeting in the following April? What's the thinking?
Good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, we can't postpone until December. I mean, basically up to the annual town meeting. I mean, sometimes the recommendations made right on the floor of town meeting,
Right. So I think, so are we talking that the special, Mike, do you have some sense of that? I'm not clear on when the moderator would put the things that we're deferring, when would they come up? At what point does she intend or think that a special would be called?
I don't think we know. I think it's just trying to work on getting the sort of postponed town meeting in place and then going from there. She hasn't really said anything. I'm happy to ask her and I'll certainly get back to you, but I don't know.
She's my appointing authority. I can ask her. It's no problem.
I'm not sure. I understand what you said, and that's a good point, and it's a way to think about it that I hadn't thought about it. I was even, sort of saying, look, we could agree in theory, we like the idea to spend money on this. We could say that, but I would hold to actually saying we give it a yes for the town meeting that will occur in September until we know more, probably in August, about where we shake out on free cash. I don't want to allocate free cash when I don't know what it is. That's my only
No, that's a good point. So to me, that puts it in the non-essential bucket.
Okay.
What we would propose to town meeting as being a non-essential. In other words, we don't have to decide in September. That's
Okay.
one way we could accomplish what you're proposing.
So we really have a three-way recommendation strategy here, which is affirmative action, no action, or non-essential, which just kicks the can down the road.
Exactly.
Special
Until
meeting.
we have better information. Right.
Okay, well, Mary, when you, I, and Mike Lawson get together with Linda,
Okay.
we're gonna have that conversation.
Good.
Um,
And we'll
all
bring
right, well, I think
we
we've
bring it back.
managed to-
We
What's
bring it back. And then we bring it back to the finance committee
Right.
to get, and with joint meeting. Okay, so it's not our decision, it's,
No, it's gonna be jointly
that's right.
made by both committees in a joint meeting.
Great. Good.
Um,
You looking for a motion to adjourn?
I'm not looking for that. I have to mention that there's correspondence, which we've had a
Right.
few different pieces. I think we were CC'd. Dory Keogh wrote a note, which I think was received between the last meeting and this, but I think that was sent to the select board. And, it was concerns about, but we received a note just the other day from a resident on Estabrook Road. And I'm just wondering if anybody would like to make any comments about that. It, is quite a detailed note about, our legal posture and the behavior of the, of our town council and et cetera. Yes, Andrea.
I think if we get into that, we're getting into the area of the litigation where we really have no place to be. If we discuss the detail of that letter, I think it's not what we have to do.
I want to say that we have been involved in this, not by choice entirely, but for quite a while. I mean, but anyway, and that letter, I won't comment further.
Okay.
I think, what we said earlier about the discussion on the legal accrual, it stands here. Our role is around the budgeting and the accrual of the fees and the spending of the money in the budget. And the other claims related to the appropriateness of actions on either side of a lawsuit is really not our purview. And so I appreciate the communication, but I think it's better directed to the select board, not to the finance.
They've been putting pressure on us for 3 years on the finance committee,
Yes.
members of the finance committee.
Well, I think that we've shown some amount of resistance in the budgeting process, and we don't need to revisit even this meeting. We've had plenty of conversation about the budgeting process around the legal budget line item. So I think that I agree with Andrea, Chris, and that the level of detail that this is diving into is really beyond the purview of this committee. Mary?
I think
Mrs.
that
Brosh.
the letter, Parashar, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would agree, but I think Brooks Reed is in the audience, and since she's been waiting, do we want to at least hear from them before we move to the next item?
He doesn't have his hand up, but I'll invite him to speak if you'd like to speak. Reed, your mic is turned on, or you're able to speak. Well, I guess not. Okay. I think we've reached the limits of our agenda, and so I need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, second. I need a second, and we're going to have to do a roll call to shut it down. Ms. Hartman, how do you move?
Yes.
Oh, yay. And I, Dean Banfield, the chair, I vote yes. Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Ms. Ortner,
Yes.
Mr. Jameson,
Yes.
Ms. Zoll,
Yes.
Mr. Packard,
Yes, and good night.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Swain, you're muted, Mr. Hickling.
Yes.
Yes. Good night, all. Thank you.
Good
very
night,
much.
everybody. Good night. Good to see you all.